Thank you for listening to the Q the A podcast, where you question the answers. I'm Dookie Royale, and he's Eon K. Grissom. We're covering topics from UFOs to food politics, from government black budgets to corporatism and things that matter to us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Q the A podcast. This is your host, Dookie Royale. This is going to be a fun addendum to the regular shows that we have every week. This week, we're going to be talking about NDEs, or near-death experiences. Now, I've been reading a few books on NDEs. One by Betty Eadie called Embraced by the Light. And Betty's story involves her going to heaven and being there for a very long time, and being able to come back and describe many, many details of her experience. Another experience that we have here is Bruce Van Netta, who has a book out called Saved by Angels. And Bruce had an experience where he was floating in the room and saw angels come down and work on him. Another book that I've been reading, Don Piper, 90 Minutes in Heaven, is an account where he was in a car accident and was pronounced dead for over 90 minutes and came back to life. He has a great story about his description of who he met when he got there, and God's energy and light. Now, before we get to the stories, I want to encourage listeners to go to the Q the A Podcast Facebook page. That's over at facebook.com/Q the A Podcast. You can come visit us over at Twitter as well, at twitter.com/Q the A Podcast, and don't forget to email us at qtheapodcast@gmail.com. Now, what is an NDE? Well, it's not an OBE. It's not an out-of-body experience, but an near-death experience is when you effectively die and go to another realm. In these stories you're about to hear today, these individuals went to a heaven-like experience. Now, there are hell-like experiences, and there's also the majority documented in a book by Raymond Moody. The majority of people just experience a sense of relief from the burdens of earthly experience, and maybe have a life review and are guided by spirit guides. But check out these three stories. This is the Heaven Experience NDEs. Also check out the International Association for Near-Death Studies, on which is also called IANDS, IANDS, on YouTube. They have tons and tons and tons of experiences that you can just kind of listen to and scroll through. But as for this podcast, let's take a listen to Bruce Van Netta's experience and how he saw angels working on his body and brought him back to life.
Bruce Van Netta loved trucks, and his job as a self-employed diesel mechanic helped this Christian family man live out his power truck dreams and provide for his wife and 4 children. He never gave a second thought to the dangers of working on engines that weighed thousands of pounds until November 16th, 2006.
I was working on a Peterbilt logging truck about an hour from our home, and the guy that I was working with that day, the driver of the truck, asked me if I would look and try and diagnose one more problem, one more leak before I left. So if you can picture one of these great big Peterbilt trucks, here's the front bumper, and I slipped underneath that great big chrome bumper feet first. And he had the front axle jacked up in the air and the passenger side wheel removed. The axle is going right across my chest at this point, maybe an inch or two above my chest.
Then just as Bruce slipped under the truck, the 20-ton capacity jack holding up the truck shot out from its position.
And this 10,000, 12,000 pounds of weight that is on these 2 front wheels, on this axle, came down across my midsection, basically like a blunt guillotine, and just crushed me in half. Blood had splattered the inside of my throat, the back of my throat when it fell. And I could see that there was less than an inch of airspace between the bottom of the axle and the cement. So I knew that I was thinner than my body was thinner than an inch. The man jacked the truck up off of me. I begged him to get me out from underneath the truck. He didn't want to because he could tell that I had to have a broken back, and I did. My vertebrae in my back were cracked the width of the axle. It was the most incredible pain you can think of. I've never felt any kind of pain like that. The very next thing it is, I just called out, "Lord, help me." I called it out twice, "Lord, help me."
Instantly, all of the pain left Bruce's body.
At that point, I went unconscious. My spirit left my body, floated up into the ceiling, and now my spirit is looking down on the accident scene from above. The man I've been working with was on his knees above my body. He's talking, I can hear him talking. He's saying things like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." But on each side of him, also on their knees, was a huge angel. Their heads stuck up at least this much taller than his head. So if you would have stood them up, they would have had to been like 8 feet tall. They did not have wings. They were just very broad shoulders. Again, between the two angels and him, it took up the whole front of this truck. There was a bright light shining around each one of them. They were matching bookends. They looked identical. They just had their arms underneath the truck, not holding the truck up, but had their arms angled in towards my body. There was no pain. In fact, just peace. And I can't even describe, words can't describe the peace that I felt in the ceiling.
Bruce knew he had a serious choice to make.
I was definitely on the verge of life and death. There were two voices, thoughts in my head. One was, shut your eyes, give up and die, and you're just gonna go to heaven anyway. It was very loud. There was another voice in my head, thought, much quieter, more of a whisper, and that one said, if you want to live, you're gonna have to fight, and it's gonna be a hard fight. And next thing I knew, my spirit went back down into my body like that, just like a shot.
Bruce was conscious as he was flown on a life flight to the hospital. Doctors there doubted he would even survive the next few hours. His ribs were broken, his pancreas and spleen crushed, and several major arteries had been severed.
I had five places that major arteries were completely severed. I found out from doctors that there was a medical study done in 2001. According to that study by the University of Southern California, they've used my case and compared it against that study, and according to that, they can't find anyone else in the world that's ever lived with 5 major arteries being severed. So I should have bled to death in just a few minutes. So my thought is the angels were there to somehow hold me together.
Bruce stayed in the hospital for over 2 months and survived 5 major surgeries. Yet he had overwhelming obstacles to overcome. Almost 75% of his small intestines were crushed in the accident and had to be removed.
Adult has 18 to 20 some feet of small intestine, they say, roughly. Somebody came in and told us they didn't expect me to live much more than a year. I'm going to starve to death. I was losing weight very rapidly. They're feeding me intravenously.
Bruce's once 180-pound frame dropped to 126 pounds. But Bruce's family was praying and his community rallied around him. Then Bruce received an unexpected visitor in his hospital room one day.
The Lord woke up a man in New York 2 days in a row, someone that I met one time on vacation. And he came and prayed for me in the hospital, put his palm on my forehead, and when he prayed the way Jesus taught us to pray, and he spoke to the mountain, in this case my intestine, and he said, small intestine, I command you to supernaturally grow back in length in the name of Jesus Christ. And when he did, it felt like 220 volts came out of his palm into my forehead, right into my body, and I could feel my intestines moving around and going up and down.
After a long 9 months of surgeries and hospital stays, Bruce was eventually able to feed himself, and he gained weight all the way up to 170 pounds. When he returned for testing, radiology reports and doctors confirmed that he had almost 9 feet of small intestine. His intestines had doubled in length.
When they test me, they say that the intestines that the Lord gave me back work twice as good as normal. Even though I don't have my full amount, he gave me several feet back. Even though it's half as much, they absorb the vitamins, the minerals, the nutrients that I eat into my body normally. Over and over, the Lord kept confounding the doctors from the point of them saying that I shouldn't have lived, I should have bled to death, to my intestines miraculously coming back. Over and over, God was showing miracles are happening. My pancreas rejuvenated by itself, my spleen rejuvenated by itself, miracle after miracle after miracle. God just kept showing up and showing himself very real and strong, that he is the miracle worker.
Today, through their organization, Sweetbread Ministries, Bruce and his family travel together to talk about supernatural healing. Bruce has also written a book called Saved by Angels.
Miracle after miracle after miracle. It's exciting to just see what God is doing in people's lives today, and that he is alive and well, and he wants to reach people at their point of need. And so we've got a God that loves us more than we can ever imagine, and he pours out his love on us in such an amazing way that it's undescribable.
All right, what a great story that was. That was from Bruce Van Netta on his book, Saved by Angels. Now what we're going to listen to next is a lengthy account of Betty Eadie's Embraced by the Light story, where she went to heaven and was able to bring back lots of detailed descriptions about what happened to her while she was on the other side. Take a listen to Betty Eadie.
Hello, welcome to The Other Side. I'm Dr. Will Miller. Embraced by the Light has been on the bestseller list for 1 year. Millions have been touched by an ordinary woman's moving account of an extraordinary near-death experience. Betty Eadie's book is a revealing and surprising exploration of life beyond death. Now, whether you believe her story or not, it has given many an inspirational and comforting message. Congratulations on the success of your book. A very moving story. You died after an operation for a hysterectomy.
Yes, I did. After I had the hysterectomy, it actually was later on that evening that I experienced my death. I died from hemorrhage around 9:30 p.m. and I was alone in the room. I was not attended by doctors or nurses. They'd actually bedded me down for the evening.
So you did not have the story we often hear where someone goes out and then are resuscitated. No one resuscitated you.
No, I was very healthy. I was 31 years old, and they expected me to recover perfectly. And
how did you know you died? Do you remember the moment you died?
I do, very clearly.
What happened?
I felt my body dying, literally, starting from my feet, my hands, creeping up through my body. And it's a feeling that's very distinctive. You know something is extremely wrong. And then there was this tremendous sinking sensation. There was a pop, and then a movement in my chest, and my spirit came up out of my body, at my chest, ran up to the ceiling, and I turned and I looked down, and I could see myself lying there on the bed.
We've heard that kind of experience many times with near-death experiences. Then what happened? Go on.
Well, I came down for a closer look. And I was very, not frightened, but I think I was disturbed for just being alone in the room. And I noticed that there appeared in my room 3 men that were in a soft glow about them. They stood about 2 feet above the floor. And they explained to me that they were my guardian angels and that they had always been with me throughout all my time here on earth, but also they had known me when I was in heaven before I came to earth.
You've described them in your book as monks. Is that how they appeared, as monks?
They appeared to me like monks. They looked like that, or I'd have to say 3 old men in bathrobes.
And then what happened? You saw a light?
There was a light, and this was sometime later. I actually went home first to see my family. Visiting in my home, I saw my husband and my children. I saw my husband reading the newspaper. My children were preparing for bed. And there was a strange detachment. I felt as though their lives were perfectly fine without me, and that it would be okay for me to go on without them. And then I went back to the hospital, and I was drawn up into this black space by some tremendous amount of force. And while I was in this black space, there were others that occupied this space, going through a transformation much similar to what I was going through. It was very loving, and it was very warm and beautiful, but it was very, very black.
You weren't frightened in that
And no,
stage.
I wasn't. I felt a tremendous amount of love there. But then I saw a pinpoint of light, and I was attracted to that light, and I began to move feet first, noting for the first time that my body, I had a spiritual body, and that I had some light in me. It was very dim, but it was glowing. It began to travel towards this brighter light, and that brighter light would be compared to perhaps your sun here on the brightest day, perhaps by another 100,000 times, if you could imagine it. And I just traveled very quickly towards it. As I came to the light, I could see that it was a being, a person, that was emanating this light. The light was flowing from him. And as I got closer, I knew who this man was. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, just like I would know a grandfather or a grandmother, I knew that he was Jesus Christ. And I began to rush to him. And I said to myself over and over as I was running, I'm home, I'm finally home, and I never, ever want to leave you again, almost chastising him for having had to have this separation from him. But he just held his arms out as I ran into them, and he held me, and he loved me unconditionally. And there was a humorous nature about this man.
So you had believed
was,
in Jesus before?
Yes, I was raised in the Catholic boarding schools when I was very young, and Protestant as well. So I did believe in Jesus Christ.
When people hear about these experiences, it's hard to convey what the feeling is like. I mean, right now we can all relate to. You're sitting there, we're sitting here.
Right.
The way it feels to move around in our body.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe what that movement was like going through this experience?
It was more natural to me than sitting here and talking to you right now. In that when you leave the physical, and you go back to the spiritual, the physical here seems dead. It seems non-existent, slow, heavy. In my book, when I came back into the body, it was heavy and clay-like, and that's how it seems here. It is very dull in comparison.
Now, how did you know that this being was Jesus?
I knew him. I remembered him. It was a recognition. He didn't appear to me with nail prints in his hands or in any of the familiar ways that we are accustomed to seeing here on earth, such as the pictures. But he appeared to me, they explained to me that he appeared in what would be all his glory.
Now, is it possible that in this state, that because it was part of your background and your belief system, that it would be expected that, say, in your personal case, you would encounter Jesus, and for another person who had a different kind of religious experience, they might encounter the way God would be manifest in their religion? What is your response to that?
Yes. In fact, I asked about that. It was part of my questioning, you might say. I needed to know. And I learned there that if you had another belief system, God would not shock you out of your belief system, but that you would ultimately, we all would come to know that God did exist and that Jesus existed as well. But, that we would all be drawn to that knowledge eventually. Well, heaven was absolutely beautiful, Will. One of the things that I thought was very curious, though, was the large looms that were very archaic, very old-looking, and they were weaving material that looked like spun glass or spun sugar. And then I was taken to the most magnificent garden. It was very beautiful with trees and flowers of all colors, and the grass was very crisp and very cool under my feet. But I noticed that it was as though every blade of grass had intelligence, and it was happy that I was walking on it. I know that sounds very crazy in a way, but it was wonderful. And a flower that I was particularly interested in was a rose, and I was able to enter into that rose by some strange and unusual way, just desiring to be a part of it. I entered in and became a part of it. And as I felt love for this rose, the rose began to expand and literally grew right there with me inside of it. And I learned from that as you love things, they absolutely will grow, not only just physically, but they grow spiritually by that love.
So you come back, and what lesson does that give you as a living person now?
That's what it's all about there. Jesus said to me that our purpose for being here on this earth is to learn to love, and that is one of the most important things. That if we love one another, everything else will be okay. I was so bewildered, I guess, and confused because of the religious training that I had had. I call it a Heinz 57 because I had attended just about every church you could imagine. And here I was experiencing my death, experiencing life, if you will, with Jesus. And I had not been taught these things. And so I wanted to know. And he wanted me to know all the answers. And so as I asked him, he gave me whatever I wanted. He let me tap into what is called pure knowledge. And so I learned many of the laws that govern us here on this earth.
Let's start with the basics. Why are we here?
Why are we here? To learn to love.
How has this changed, Betty?
When I was 31, I was a woman with a great deal of attitude. I was raised in such a fashion to where I had a chip on my shoulder. I had a lot of anger, a lot of I was very judgmental. I judged everyone for whatever purposes. I went through what was called a ripple effect. And this ripple effect was like a life review, showing that what you do to others is going to come back to you. Not only will the pain that you cause them ripple back to its creator, you, but the pain that others create in other people because of what you've done to them, that all comes back.
Now, these are very profound lessons, but you know, life is hard to do.
Not all people are lovable either.
It's very difficult, isn't it?
Yes, it is hard to love.
So what help do we have?
I learned that we all have guardian angels. As a matter of fact, I had 8. Now, I thought 8. And I thought, am I a particularly tough case? And no, I am not. We all have many guardian angels that are around us, and not constantly they're imposing, but you may have 2 or 3 at one time, and during your deeper, darkest hours, you may have 8 or more. And they do not interfere with your free will, but they try to encourage you to do the right things, and always leading you and directing you towards the right things in your path.
Do you now, in your sort of day in, day out life, have actual spiritual experiences analogous to that, or was this a one-time thing from which you took all of this?
No, when I came back from my experience, I came back with a keener sense of spirituality, and I often tap into pure knowledge, not only about events coming up, but perhaps people as well.
But you don't have visions routinely now?
No, I don't. I did for a while, and to tell you quite frankly, Will, I had to pray that they would stop because they were interfering with my life.
It's hard to live a normal
it's
day
hard,
in and
yes,
day out
you cannot
life.
live in both worlds.
How long were you out of your body, or how long you were dead?
The time was not actually known, but it may have been up to 4 hours.
But they never found that out, did they, Betty? They never knew for sure.
No, because I was left alone.
Okay, you said you were up in heaven. Did you see anybody else? Or was it
Yes,
just...
I did. I was greeted by what they explained to me was like a greeting party that meets us all. And many of you, if you've had loved ones that were dying, and they might say, oh, here's Grandma so-and-so, or cousin so-and-so, or uncle so-and-so. This is part of their graduation party or greeting party.
As a parent, I find it would be very hard for me to leave my children. How did you handle it?
You know, I felt the same way because I had 7 children that I deeply loved, and my husband as well. But when I left the hospital and went to see my children and my husband, I wondered why I didn't have that feeling of despair in leaving them. But I could see into each of their lives, and I knew that they were here on earth with their own agenda, and that it would be okay that whatever I was needed for in their lives had been taken care of. It was done.
I believe in the spiritual realm also, but I'm wondering how you knew that it was Jesus when the scripture says that Satan can come as an angel of light Did you ask him, are you Jesus, or what was it that led you to believe that he was Jesus?
He knew me. He didn't have to say, are you Betty? He knew who I was. I knew who he was. And the love, the tremendous love that I felt there. Satan is a deceiver and a liar, there's no doubt.
Well, when we return, we're going to meet a man whose life was completely turned around after reading Betty's book. I'd like you to meet Captain A.J. Stewart, whose life was changed after speaking with you on the telephone. Welcome. This is the first time you've met, isn't it, today?
Yeah. It is.
Yeah, well, join us. Have a seat.
I feel like we're kin. After I read the book, I feel very connected.
As happy as this moment is, it comes about as the result of a tragedy. You had a very, very painful loss not very long ago in January.
Yes, I did.
Your granddaughter, in many ways, was really like your daughter, who you have raised at 16 years old, was killed tragically. Tell us about that. What happened?
Well, my granddaughter and my grandson both 16. I bought her a car, and they went off to school in the morning, and they were a little late getting home, and the sheriff's department came and told me that they'd had a head-on collision with a county dump truck, and they were both dead.
And you bought the car and felt very guilty about that.
Oh, yeah, I bought the car, and I taught her to drive, and I felt then, and still do, feel that it was my fault, and I felt the only thing I could do was to drive down to the gravel pit and eat my pistol. I didn't think that I should keep on living when the kids were dead.
Now, this is coming from a man. You have been a sea captain, you've been in 3 wars, you have seen your share of death and have had tragedy in your life.
Yeah. I've been in 3 wars and typhoons and hurricanes. I've been torpedoed, I've been bombed, and nothing ever devastated me as much as this. It just tore me apart.
Especially your granddaughter was really like your own daughter. You raised her right after your son's divorce. She was like a daughter to you. How close were you to her?
Very close. I was her very own Aunt Pa.
So you're in the midst of this horrible grief, suicidal even, thinking about taking your own life.
Yes, the sheriffs were incredibly kind after the incident, but they searched the house and picked up all my guns, picked up my car keys, and
fearful that you were going to kill yourself.
Yeah, it's a small town, and they still sort of keep an eye on me. And but after I read the book...
When did you read the book?
Well, my psychologist told me about it, and I went out and bought it, and I read the book, and I just had this tremendous feeling of frustration. I just wanted my kids. And I read the book, and I got some peace and some hope from the book. I just felt that maybe they'd gone to a better place, and I just felt more peaceful after I read it. And
can you describe to Betty what it was about the book that was so healing for you?
Well, one of the things that disturbed me the most is my son is a detective, and he investigates these things. And he said that the kids knew for 6.2 seconds that they were going to die. And that was driving me crazy. And in Betty's book, it said that the spirit will leave the body, and that made me feel an awful lot better that they didn't have to go through the trauma of being smashed. The car was smashed flat, and that made me feel a lot better. And then the whole book in general, it just gave me peace, and it gave me hope. And I'm still slightly suicidal, but it's not something I'm going to run right out and do.
While on the one hand you have peace that your kids are okay, does the temptation exist for you because of what you know is available to you when you die?
Not really. Just the idea of getting dead never worried me an awful lot. The type of work I did, you pays your nickel and you takes your chances, and I never dwelled on it. If it happened, it happened. And the idea of going out and doing it is is just the feeling I no longer have anything to live for. My kids are gone, and my wife is sick, and she's not recovering well from the grief. And but then I got thinking, I've got my wife to take care of. I've got other children. I got grandchildren, and my children are all in their 40s, but they still all lean on Papa.
Betty, what's your reaction?
Captain Stewart called me, and I don't often have the opportunity to call people, but there was just something about the message that he left. And I called him, and immediately felt a connection with him, a real love for this man. And when he explained to me that both of his grandchildren were killed in this car wreck, it was the way he said it. It was as though everything in his life had been removed from him. And we spoke for, I don't know, maybe an hour.
Mm-hmm.
We talked.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to let him off the phone until I knew that he was going to be okay. And we've kept in touch. He's called me back. And I love this man. I absolutely love him. And is he going to commit suicide? Absolutely not. I'm not about to let him. But he has a lot of pain. He has been in a lot of, it's been awful for him. And because it was 2 grandchildren, one from one son, the other child from another son, it's almost more than the family could bear.
What did you tell him?
Do you remember?
I don't really remember.
We just talked about a little bit of everything, but I remember him telling me about his grandchildren, how long it took them before they died, the 6.2 seconds.
Yeah.
And I told him, I says, they probably had already left their body, because when a spirit is in trauma, it does not necessarily stay with the body to experience the pain. I know that your spirit can leave your body and actually be up here somewhere and watch the body continuing as though you were watching someone else. I mean, you're watching your body continue in the wreck, and you're not there.
So based on your experience, in very specific, real terms, it's very comforting for people to know who have a loved one who's been killed, that what we believe they have gone through in terms of pain and terror may not in fact be the case. It could be helpful to people.
And they were only 16, but
Kids.
It was absolutely their time to go. Yeah. They were in a rural area, and the chances, you know, the coincidence, I guess, of this automobile striking another car out in this area, the odds are ridiculous. In favor of them never having this happen.
You asked Jesus why there is pain in the world. What answer did you get?
Yes, I did. I learned that there's pain in the world because it is part of the natural growth process, that if we didn't learn pain, we would not learn joy or happiness. And so some of us that have probably the greater pain are actually the greater spirits capable of handling that additional growth period.
Does that go for horribly innocent suffering, like the Holocaust would come to mind?
Yes,
people
it does.
Just victimized in pain.
Yes, it does. And I know that that is very difficult to understand at the earthly level. But if you could understand it from the spiritual sense, in that the spirit is so much stronger.
What about people who inflict pain? Are there negative spirits as well as positive ones, angels?
When you talk about the people that inflict pain, that is basically could be any one of us here in this room. And I learned that these people are just giving back what they have received in life. Often it is even actually genetically coded. Some of the trends, I guess, that run through families.
Were you a dysfunctional person yourself?
Well, you know, no one likes to think that, but yes, I had my problems, and I was a real fighter. I had a very bad temper. I was raised in Indian boarding schools, and we had to fight actually for survival.
See, you come across as very, you know, shy, and actually there's almost even some sadness that I feel from you.
I think what you are probably touching into is the sadness for Mr. Stewart, because that was a very sad occasion for him, and it still touches my heart when I think about it. But no, I'm a very serene person now.
You had the best news any human being could ever have, and in a very vivid and real way.
Yes.
Are you happy personally?
I am not fearful, and that makes me happy because, I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen to a person? You could die, right? I already did that.
Do you feel like you're a joy-filled person? Do you have
Yes,
joy?
yes. I look forward to every day because I know it's a new day and I can begin all over again.
Yes, Betty, I want to know, did you ever have any religious encounters like this prior to your death experience?
I had had a near-death experience actually when I was 4 years old, and it made some impact, I'm sure. But the increased ability for spiritual experiences since my death it absolutely occurs all the time.
I want to ask Betty, what did Jesus look like?
Yeah, anything like the pictures, Betty?
In ways, yes, because they have captured emotion that I could tell that was, you know, a part of him. The love in the eyes, but the color of the hair, no, he was a being of light. But then again, this was in all his glory rather than his earthly body.
Yes, in the Bible it talks about people having visions. I'd like to know, do you think it's more like it could be a dream or a vision as opposed to a near-death experience?
Or is a near-death experience a dream or a vision?
Well, I think you would have to experience all of these things to know the difference. And I'm an avid dreamer. I love to dream. I dream in color. I dream in black and white. I always have. And I have hallucinated before after a death of one of my daughters. I hemorrhaged then, and I hallucinated. So I know what dreaming and what hallucination is. What I experienced was actually heightened awareness. And so, no, I wasn't dreaming. I did not hallucinate.
When you were talking to Jesus in the light, did you feel you had a choice, or do you feel you were sent back to this side to spread the word of love to people like us and to people like the captain?
I didn't want to come back because of his tremendous love for me. It was very difficult. I actually told him I was not going to come back. But he
You
said
refused Jesus?
I know, but he's a loving person, and yes, I did. I threw myself down and I said, I'm through with earth, and no one here is going to make me go back. Remember, I carried forth that fighting spirit that I had. But he said my mission was not finished. He says it's not complete, and you need to go back and to do that.
Eddie, you said that when your spirit left your body, you could look down and see your body. What did your spirit look like?
My spirit, I'm kind of going to be embarrassed to tell you this, because before I had my experience, you know, everyone, you look at yourself in a flat image, you see a flat image in the mirror, and I always felt I was unattractive. And so when right after I died and I came down to look at my body, I could see myself in a three-dimensional view or more, and I thought, my gosh, you know, I wasn't so bad looking after all. And but when I saw myself for the first time in the spirit, the loving part of me, the spiritual part, when you crawl out of your flesh, what is left is the love that you have. And at first, when I died, I was only 7 watts. And then, as I was in the love of Christ, I expanded in his love, and then I became a beautiful being of light.
So in very real terms,
So it
or
was
in
beautiful,
in
yeah.
therapist terms, you had a change in your self-esteem as a result of this experience.
Not just self-esteem, because that is definitely a part of it. It wasn't just self-esteem, but I lost my judgmental attitude.
Changed your whole way of living your life.
It changed my whole religious belief system as well.
What is your mission? What were you told your mission
I don't
is?
know. We all have missions. We're all not to know what they are, because I was told that if I knew what my mission was, I would hurry up, rush out, and complete it so that I could get back.
Now, I'm a minister myself, and so it's not a big leap for me to believe and to be touched by your story. What do you say to people who do not have religious or spiritual experience or faith? What do you say to them?
Well, Will, I receive thousands of letters from my readers, and many of these readers never had a belief in God or any religious belief at all. They never felt that they had purpose in life, and they are absolutely in wonderment, I guess you might call it, after reading the book, because your spirit always knows the truth. It is always tapped in to some degree to this pure knowledge that I mentioned in the book. And so when you hear a truth, it just sends a chill through you, or a warmth. But you always know when you hear truth. And so this is what these people are saying. I've touched into a truth, and so I know that I could now go out and find out who God is.
What about the traditional religions that are very conservative? They have criticized your book. What have people said about your book, the religious people said about your book?
Well, that's interesting, because some people will say, well, I've had people come up to me and say, well, Betty, I'm a Christian, and by dang, your book is no good, and da-da-da-da, you know.
They've said that, by dang, your book is no good?
Well, they said, you know, I'm not going to say it.
They even less appropriate language than that.
Well, you know, I know those other words, too. I'm just not going to use them.
Just not used to hear them.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, by gum, or whatever.
Yeah. And so basically what I've said to them is, you know, if you have to approach someone and say, I'm a Christian, or, for instance, if you have to have a tag that says mean dog, then obviously you're not what you think you are.
So according to your comment then, when I said, as a minister myself, you were basically accusing me of not really feeling like a minister, is basically what that is. I'm teasing. Tell us about what it was like when you re-entered. Your re-entry.
That was very difficult, because I didn't want to come back. You know, I could sit here and be playful with the experience, because I was actually told by Jesus to lighten up. I was too intense of an individual. But when you talk about the reentry, I suddenly feel pangs of I guess, despair that I remembered that I felt back then, because I didn't want to come back to an earth that I felt was not loving, and but I knew that I wanted to please God. And so as I came back to the body and I looked at myself, I knew I had to quickly get back in or I'd change my mind. And so when I crawled back into my body, it was the most devastating thing ever to my spirit. My body felt cold, it felt damp, it was clammy. In the book I said it's like taking coveralls and dredging them through the mud, and then having crawled out of a clean shower and then pulling these on. And that's how I felt. It felt dirty and heavy and weighty. But in the body now, I feel restricted and restrained and held back. But I would not ever, and this is why I know Captain Stewart isn't going to do this either, because I'm going to talk him out of it. Mm-hmm. But I would never, and I would talk anyone out of committing suicide to have this kind of an experience, because it might not happen for you.
In the book you mentioned a ballerina spirit. Tell us about that.
The ballerina was a spirit that I had met while I was in this heavenly place. It was a beautiful female spirit, and years later, this beautiful spirit I knew came into my life as my adopted daughter. And the vision that was, the image that was given me, how I would recognize her, is that she would crawl up on my husband's toe, and with the lift of the back of her other foot, like a ballerina, she would dig into his pocket. And when my adopted daughter was 2 years old, she did just that. And I knew that I had indeed made that contact with the spirit that I was bonded to previous to this life.
Now, if you enjoyed that story, you're going to really enjoy this next story by Don Piper. His book, 90 Minutes in Heaven, is an extraordinary account of how he was crushed by a semi-tractor trailer, dead within the first 15 minutes, and laid in the car for over 90 minutes. He has a story of how a preacher got out of the car and came to the accident scene and prayed over his body while he was in heaven enjoying it. Take a listen to this. It's one of the most extraordinary accounts, and we saved the best for last. Here we go.
On a cold January day in 1989, Don Piper's life changed forever.
I was coming home from a church conference in East Texas, headed back to Houston.
At precisely 11:45 a.m., an 18-wheeler driven by a Texas state prisoner rolled over the small car at a combined speed of 110 miles an hour.
Not only did the truck hit Don's car, it ran over the passenger side of the small Ford Escort, completely crushing the vehicle and killing Don Piper. Instantly, Don began an amazing journey.
I was immediately transported to the gates of heaven and surrounded by people I had known in life who had preceded me. And I mean, they weren't complete in the sense that we are now, but there were people there, and I recognized them. I tell people it was a buffet for the senses. The aroma, the sights, the sounds. I heard the wings that hovered above me. I heard music that I never heard on earth. And they were all singing glory to God songs, hallelujah songs, praise songs. And they were all doing them simultaneous, and there was no chaos.
Well, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Where you been hiding?
Well, in the back. But I'm out here in the front now, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for letting me come.
Oh, thank you. It is a privilege to have you here. I have been waiting a long time to meet you personally.
But it's good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's great to have you. Don, you have, and you know this, you have an amazing story. I don't know of anyone else, personally, who can say they were dead for 90 minutes. Now, I believe that 4 EMT, emergency medical technicians, 4 different EMTs confirmed that you were dead at the crash site. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was hit head on, of course, by the truck, and it was a very rural area, but there were also 2 other vehicles involved, and therefore they dispatched 4 ambulances to the scene, knowing that there were at least 4 victims. Fortunately, no one else was seriously hurt, including the truck driver, and then the other 2 people who were involved in the accident, the other 2 drivers, which freed the paramedics, the EMTs, to work on me. So 4 of them worked on me. We would never have that many people working on one victim, but there was no one else to treat, and it was obvious I was in really terrible shape, so they worked on me and really did everything they could to try to revive me, bring me back, resuscitate me. But they were unsuccessful, so I was pronounced dead on the scene, which I think always brings up an interesting question. What am I doing here? You know, if I was dead on the scene. And the question I ask to everyone here is, what are you doing here? You know, I mean, what are you doing here? What is your reason for living? What do you have to show for your life to this point? Well, obviously, I was confronted with that on a bridge in the middle of nowhere. They pronounced me dead. The body was covered up with a tarp so nobody would have to see it. and they were waiting for a medical examiner to come and sign the paperwork so I could be transported to a mortuary.
Now, if I remember correctly, legally they cannot remove you until it's verified and signed off on a death certificate?
Yeah, you have a medical examiner, a coroner. This person has to come out to the scene and actually sign a release because there's going to have to be an investigation. Anytime you have a fatality, you're going to have an investigation. So they were making arrangements for that person to come, and his absence, his delay, meant that they couldn't remove the body, which meant that it just had to lay there, which meant that traffic began to back up on both ends of this bridge. And it didn't matter for me anyway. I was absent from the body and present with the Lord, and I was having the best time. Yeah. Yeah, they were all agonizing over the traffic and the body and the mess, and it was a horrible mess. And nothing could have been further from my mind. I was actually having the best time. So I was unaware of what was happening on the bridge. Some people talk about looking down. I was not looking down. And when I was in heaven, you're not looking down, you're looking out. You're looking at all the people that are there to greet you. You're looking at all the awesome things that are there. You're in the presence of God. So what's happening here is of very little interest. But now they were really having an agony. They were really struggling on the bridge with how to, contact my family, to let them know about the death. A lot of things were happening on the scene, all of which I was unaware of.
Right. Now, there was traffic backed up a long way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the only way across this lake. And it happened on an old bridge. I mean, this bridge was built to honor veterans of World War I. So it was a very old bridge, very narrow. And it's the only way across this lake. So in both directions, traffic is backing up, the one that the truck was coming from and the one I was coming from. Now, the one I was coming from is where the conference was dismissed. And there were about 250 pastors there. So they were behind me trying to get back to their churches to lead a Wednesday night service like I was. But of course, we're not going anywhere now. They're behind me and I'm dead. So they're backed up, and they got a little restless. One of them, probably several, but at least one of them left his car. He and his wife walked up to the bridge to try to figure out, why are we stopped? Why are we blocked? And he saw the wreck. You couldn't miss it. There were 4 vehicles. And he said to the policeman, I'm a pastor. I see there's been a terrible accident here. Is there anyone I can pray for? And the policeman said, no, there's no one to pray for. And he meant that everyone else was okay, and the man in the red car is dead. And that's what he said. The man in the red car is dead. So there's no one to pray for. And when he said that, God directly spoke to the pastor on the bridge. I think God's doing a lot more speaking than we are listening. And here's what he said: pray for the man in the red car. And this made no sense to the preacher. He never even remotely considered praying for someone already dead. But he knew I was, and he knew that the policeman was telling the truth, but he also knew God was talking to him. And so he said to the policeman, I need to pray for the man in the red car. And the policeman said, did you hear what I said? He didn't make it. He's dead. And when he said that, Dick Honorecker said, I have to pray for him. God's told me to pray for him. And it was a question of obedience, not understanding.
And he was persistent.
He was a bulldog. He on a lot of levels, not just that level. I mean, even after he prayed me back, they weren't going to come over and check on me anymore because they already had, and I was dead. So he really had to fight for me all the way down the line. But he heard the voice of God. And so when you do that, I mean, what are your options? Either be obedient or disobedient. And so he was obedient, and I'm here today because of that obedience. If you do what God tells you to do, it'll always be the right thing. And so he did it, and I'm a living testimony to his obedience.
Don, recently I've just finished a series, How to Position Yourself for a Miracle.
Yes.
And one of the things that I notice in the Gospels, everyone who received a miracle were determined to get their miracle.
You have to.
They pushed in.
Absolutely. You have to not only believe in miracles, and I sense someday that some people today have lost a sense of the miraculous.
Right.
And that's really a shame, because I think God's doing some of his best things today.
Absolutely.
Ever. And I see it all the time. So, yes, you have to expect it to happen, and then you have to be in a position where you can receive the miracle, to be a part of the miracle. And so both of those are crucial elements to miracles. And when you do it, then the miraculous will happen, and it'll be a confirmation for you. But you have to surrender. It's like doing the will of God. You have to be surrendered to it before you can do it. If you waited out of curiosity to find out what it was so you could pass judgment, he won't reveal that to you. You have to be sufficiently surrendered to it, and then he will show it to you. And if you do it, miraculous things will happen.
Absolutely.
It'll happen right in front of you.
Absolutely.
It's an awesome thing.
Now, some of our guests may not have been here this morning, so just for their benefit, here is your pastor friend. You had never met him, but you had heard of him.
Yes.
He slips his hand in and touches you on the right shoulder,
Right.
and he's praying for about 90 minutes.
Hour and a half. And the reason he selected the right shoulder is because he had a medical background, and he did examine the body after he lifted the tarp that I had been covered up with. And he discovered that I had broken everything but my right arm. And since he couldn't reach my hand, he reached between the seats from behind me and put his hand on my right shoulder and began to pray and ask God for me to be delivered from the brain damage, which I obviously had because I had blood coming out of my ears and eyes and nose, and out of the internal injuries because I was impaled on the steering wheel. Both of those are life-threatening. So he's praying for those things in the car, and he's holding on to my right shoulder. And he started at 11:45 a.m., I mean just moments after the accident. And he prayed until 1:15 p.m., waiting for the medical examiner to get there. He was not going to give up. And as he's praying at 1:15 p.m. now, mind you, a lot of people are praying by that time because they've been told about the accident, but not that I was a fatality. So people are praying over the world by that time because they've heard about the accident. Many of them didn't know me. They never even heard of me, but our church had called other churches and asked them to pray. So thousands and thousands of people are praying for me. But he's in the car. He's holding on to my right shoulder, and he is singing a hymn. He's actually singing several hymns, but he gets to the hymn, What a Friend We Have in Jesus, which is a great hymn. It's about 150 years old, written by an Irishman living in Canada. And he's singing this hymn, Oh, what peace we often forfeit, oh, what needless pain we bear, all because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. What a friend we have in Jesus. He's holding on to my right shoulder. He's singing that song under the tarp that we're both covered up with in the wreckage of the car. And suddenly, without any warning there in the tarp, under the tarp, I start singing the song with him. And he gets out of the car really fast, and which is what we would all do, isn't it? Now, I'm not sure we would do this. He ran over to the policeman that he had begged to get in the car, and he said, Officer, the dead man is singing. And no one did believe that, including all the medical people.
Did the officer pull out his breathalyzer?
Yeah, probably, and understandably so. You know, this is just insane. And so unbelievable, truly unbelievable, preposterous, really. But he did have to eventually convince them by actually he threatened to lay down on the bridge in front of the remaining ambulance and said to them, if you leave without that man on the back of the car, I'm going to lie down here on this bridge and you'll have to run over me because I'm not moving until you check on him one more time. Well, he went over, and they went over just to kind of humor him, and I was alive, you know, not very alive, but I was. And then they had to extract me, which was an extraordinarily difficult thing to do.
Now, just to settle the question in people's minds, we've already stated 4 EMTs separately declared you were dead.
Right.
But your injuries were so severe, your left arm was just hanging by a little bit of flesh.
That's all.
And it was in the back seat.
That's correct.
Your leg was hanging, your left leg, only by a little bit of flesh. It was amputated.
On the bottom, yes. Okay. I had a little skin still attached. Everything else was gone.
Now, had you not have died instantly, you would have bled to death anyway because of the massive wounds.
Less than 5 minutes.
So because you died instantly, your heart stops beating.
That's correct.
And the blood doesn't bleed out.
I did not bleed out because my heart was not beating.
Okay. So here he is, 90 minutes, this arm completely cut off, bar a little bit of flesh.
Right.
Left leg completely cut off, bar a little bit of flesh.
Right.
4 inches of your femur bone is missing.
Yes, it was ejected out of the car and never found.
You would have bled to death in 3 minutes.
Absolutely,
correct?
Yes.
You would have bled to death in 3 minutes. He's dead. He doesn't lose his blood. 90 minutes later, you're singing, What a Friend We Have in Jesus.
I am, and wondering, why am I singing?
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Only God could do something like that. That is fantastic.
It's a God thing. I mean, there's no other explanation for it.
Sure.
Because there's certainly no medical explanation for it, and many doctors tried to explain it. You know, years later, I was with the doctor who was the first one to treat me at the hospital in Houston, and has subsequently operated on me 34 times.
Wow.
So I know this doctor very well, obviously. He knows me. I probably put all his kids through college by this point. But I'm having a time with him, just the two of us. It's the end of the day, and we're just visiting because we've become good friends, obviously. And I asked him, I said, "Doctor, how was it that night when they brought me in? You were the first to see me, an orthopedic surgeon. You were the first to see me. How bad was it?" And without hesitation, he said, "I've seen worse." So I said, "Oh, okay, so I'm not the most injured person you ever treated." And he said, "That's not what I said." He said, "I've seen worse people injured than you, but none of them lived. You are the most injured person I have ever seen that is here today to talk about it."
Wow.
And yes, so
God.
even doctors don't have any explanation for it. They will tell you it's a miracle that I walked onto this set, and when I'm finished, I'm walking out of here because God's still in the miracle business today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you may need one, and I've got news for you. He's still working miracles today.
Amen.
He
Praise
is.
God. Amen. That's great.
You know, Luke's gospel says that the things that are impossible with man are possible with God. And I think we aim low in that regards. We just think, well, this can't happen. It can't. This marriage can never be back together again. I could never overcome this addiction. I never am going to be able to make peace with my past.
Look, Don, obviously there was a fairly long recovery period. Just tell us quickly a little bit about the recovery, because then we want to hear about heaven. How many of you want to hear about heaven tonight?
Well, that's going to work out.
Guess what? If you didn't go to heaven, they wouldn't have come to see you tonight.
That's all right. I'm okay with that. I wouldn't have either. You know, this is going to work out well because we're taking reservations tonight. You know, if you're not ready to go, we want to make sure that you are before we leave here tonight. It was an ordeal. I actually wound up 6.5 hours after the accident in the hospital that the world has heard about recently, where the congresswoman who was shot is taken. It's Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston, one of the finest hospitals in the world. I would be in a hospital from the night I arrived there that evening for 13 months. And I would have 34 major operations to try to reassemble me. Yeah, I was missing, of course, 4 inches of my leg, and this arm had been severed. So I developed double pneumonia within about 5 days of the accident, in very grave critical condition, even after my recovery. So now I'm having to figure out how to save the arm. They wanted to amputate everything so I could be elevated to receive breathing treatments. So I did have 34 operations. They eventually decided to try an experimental treatment that had never been done in the United States, imported from the old Soviet Union, a bone stretching device which involves external fixators. It's a halo of stainless steel, actually 5 of them that were extended down my leg. 2 of them were put on my arm with rods and wires penetrating the flesh and coming out the other side. All the bones in this forearm are transplanted from my right pelvis. All the skin on this arm came from my right leg. I tell people sometimes if an archaeologist finds me 500 years from now, he's going to think he found the missing link, because everything I have has been completely rearranged. I do.
So you actually sing the song My Arm Bone is Connected to My Hip
That old bone,
Yeah.
yes, they are. They are. Yeah, the actual bones in my arm are from my hip, you know, and the skin is from my leg, so it's a wonder I could get anything to work at all. But it was a long, dark night. You can't have 34 operations, especially experimental treatments that they've never tried before. And extraordinarily painful treatments at that. 30 open wounds in my leg, 12 in my arm. I never went to sleep for a year. You say, well, you must have gotten some rest. Yes, I passed out from the pain. When you sleep, you move. I would pass out from the pain, and then I would move while I was sleeping, unconscious, and wake myself up because I would tear open these holes when I would move. And so that's the way I lived life for over a year. And it was a nightmare. It was just one of the most excruciating things ever, not just on a physical level, but an emotional level, because I was being experimented on, and no one had ever done this, and there was no one to talk to. I didn't have anybody who could tell me how it was going to turn out. I just agonized over it, and I began to really kind of not lose faith, but really kind of, I just was irritated with God for putting me through this. I was on my way to church to teach a Bible lesson when this happened, so I really wasn't in the wrong place. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was an innocent victim of a terrible accident. And I know the man who hit me wasn't trying to hurt me. In my new book, I've actually written that man a letter because I never had got to meet him. And I let him know that I'm not angry at him. I don't blame him. And the truth is, I forgive him, and I want to meet him in heaven someday since I haven't been able to meet him down here. And I told him how to go. And so I just began to kind of shake my fist at God and say, God, why did this happen to me? What are you doing to me? I don't understand it. I don't get it. And the people watching, they know that. I mean, we've all felt that before, like, what happened here? I wasn't doing anything wrong. And so God spoke to me one morning in the hospital room about 3 a.m. and said in so many words, you're seeing this all wrong, son. This is not about you. This is what I can do through you if you'll let me. If you'll allow me to use this tragedy and turn it into a triumph. You could take this test and turn it into a testimony. You could take this mess and turn it into a message. You could take the pain and turn it into a purpose.
That's right.
If you'll just allow me to do so. And so I decided that morning, instead of being knocked down, even though I had been knocked down, I wasn't going to be knocked out. You know, I'm beaten up, but I'm not beaten, and neither are you if you're here, unless you allow yourself to be. So I decided to let God take the circumstances of my life and bless somebody else, because I could be the person who held someone else's hand going through the long, dark night and saying, I understand how you feel, and I never could find anybody like that because nobody had ever done it. So the tables were turned for me, and I spend a great deal of my time in ministry now trying to help people going through the dark night, because I get it. When I do a funeral now and I walk down to the edge of a casket and put my hand on it, I say to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. I know this is true because I've experienced it myself. When I go out to the cemetery, I'll say, you know, we're going to commit this body to the ground, but I got news for you. She's more alive now than she ever was while we were here. So it changed everything in the way I do ministry. And so what you need to do if you're suffering and hurting is take the pain and turn it into a purpose and allow God to bless other people through you, because you'll understand how they feel. And so instead of having a pity party, instead of being crushed by the circumstances of life, painful parts of life, and there are painful parts, it's turning that over to God and allowing Him to use it in ways that you never dreamed and you couldn't have done had you not been knocked down. That's the key. And I've been trying to do that ever since. I call that finding a new normal, and I've made it my life work here, trying to get people into heaven and trying to help them have a better life now, even though they're hurting and have been hurt. And I know how that is. I got hit by a truck. I've got the scars to show for it. And I'm going to try to do that as long as I have breath until I return to the place I wanted to be all along, which is heaven itself. God, help us do that. And God, help you do that. If you're here and you're suffering, you know, God can use your suffering to bless someone else if you'll stop doing this and start doing this. The difference between shaking your fist at God and being bitter, and the difference between holding your hand out to someone else and being better, is a decision you'll have to make. God, help you do it.
Absolutely. You know, when you talk about a new normal, it's one thing for people to hear that you went to heaven, had this wonderful experience, but you are qualified to talk about a new normal when people can understand how low you went and the tragedy and the horrific degree of suffering. You can truly talk from your heart and empathize with people.
I can, and I often do. I was in Walter Reed Hospital some months ago, where so many of the troops from Afghanistan and Iraq are brought. And the reason they allowed me to go in is just because of the devices. These devices, you might know, are used for IUDs, the men and women who lose their limbs, or they're trying to... I talked to a young man in there who'd lost part of his leg in a horrific attack, and he saved the lives of many other people while he was doing this. And I held his hand and we talked about it, and of course I was greatly honored to be there with these heroes of our country and our faith. But at the same time, his life was never going to be the same. He was like 19.
Wow.
So I do understand that I'm going anywhere, anytime, any place to help folks like that.
Yeah.
Because I think we have an obligation out of our suffering to help other people out of their suffering. And if you do that, then it'll help you understand why you had to go through this to get to that. And I wanted another human being in the room with me to be able to say, here's how this is going to turn out. Regardless of how it was, just give me a heads up on what I was going to face. There wasn't another person like that. And so I decided to be a person like that.
Yeah.
And all of us can do that when it comes to hurting. We can, a widow or a widower can take a hand of someone who's just lost their spouse and say, I understand how you feel, and I will be here for you. And that's the process.
And you know, Don, your whole life now has been about telling people about heaven, helping them get there, and bringing this kind of comfort. I personally want to thank you.
Well, that's very kind.
We need men and women like you who will go beyond themselves to reach others. I commend you, Don. I love you for what you're doing.
Well, that's very
I mean
kind.
that from the depths of my heart.
My dad was overseas in the Army. He was a career military man. But my grandfather never left us. He was a role model for us. He was a carpenter. He was a great fella, and I adored him. And so when the night he died, I was standing outside the door when the doctor came out and said, I'm sorry, I did everything I could. We lost him. Well, now I'm looking at him face to face, and he looked better than he ever looked here. He was looking good. If you want to look good, heaven is where you want to be. And by that I mean you will be perfect. By that I mean you will have no scars. You will have no, inside or out, you'll have no scars. You'll have no blemishes. You'll have no,
awesome.
I have scars all over me, as you can plainly see. I didn't have a scratch on me in heaven. You won't have any scratches on you in heaven. The only person in heaven with scars is Jesus Christ, to remind the rest of us of how we got there. But you're not going to have any on you. You will look good. Perfect. No age, no scars, no blemishes, nothing like that. I had a lady ask me the other day, Pastor, she said, in heaven I'll be perfect. I said, yes, ma'am, you will be. She says, is there any chance at all I can be a size 2? And she was not a size 2. I said, ma'am, I'm not sure about sizes, but you'll be perfect. And she's laughed and she said, I'm going anyway. I don't care. Well, I hope you are. As I said, we're taking reservations right now. But they were all perfect, just the way God wanted them to be when he made them in the first place. Before age and injuries and circumstances have blemished them anyway, you will be that way. So I'm looking at my great-grandfather who was missing fingers here on earth, and yet when I looked at him, they were perfect. He smiled at me in a language I've never heard before, which I fully understood. He said, welcome home, Donnie. And that was the name he called me from my earliest childhood as a little boy. Welcome home, Donnie, he said. Great. And beside him was my great-grandmother. She was a victim of osteoporosis. She was slumped over because her bones had collapsed. She was not missing her fingers like my grandfather. She was missing her teeth here on earth. She was 81, and she smiled at me at the gates of heaven, standing upright, and it was the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. My best friend, or one of my good friends, was standing over here. He was killed in a car crash at 18. I was looking at aunts and uncles and teachers and people who had been a part of my life here on earth, and they were all smiling and beaming and welcoming me. You will not sneak up on heaven. Everyone knows you're coming. And it's because you have to have a reservation in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be ready to go to heaven. You have to give your heart to Christ. And so everybody there celebrates when someone makes that decision. And they anticipate our arrival. And they were all there to greet me. They were perfect in every way, without age. And by that I mean there's no birth and death in heaven, so no one ever ages. You'll be ageless. Forget what you know about aging here on earth. It doesn't happen in heaven. It's an eternal place. And so I'm surrounded by all these people that I had loved here in life and were missing. And they had different roles in my life. Some of them had been in my life when I was a young person. Some of them when I was an older person. I was 38 when the accident happened. And I reflect back on them and the glorious reunion that we had there at the gates, and the fact that they were anticipating my arrival when I got there. And the three things that they had in common were their perfection. You'll be perfect in heaven. Their preparation, because they were ready to go when they died. None of them were planning to die that day, but thank God they were ready when they did. You know, you won't be planning to die the day you do, so you have to be ready all the time. But the thing that really struck me and actually keeps motivating me to this very day is the people I met at the gates of heaven all helped me get there. They played a role in my spiritual life. They took me to church when no one else did. They told me about Jesus with their mouths and their lives. They lived a Christian life in front of me, so I knew what one was. One of the people I saw at the gates of heaven lived next door to me when I was 9 years old, Mrs. Norris. Her and her husband were foster parents in the little neighborhood where we lived. My dad was overseas. My grandparents lived far away from us. My mother didn't have a driver's license. We had no way to go anywhere unless somebody took us. And on Sunday morning, no one ever took us anywhere. I can remember looking out the blinds of my house as a 9-year-old and seeing people driving away. I knew they were going to God's house, and I would just sit there and cry because I wanted to go to church and I had no way. Mrs. Norris found out about it. She lived next door. Her and her husband were foster parents. And they had a station wagon, and they would put those foster children in the station wagon and take them to Summer Grove Church. And then they found out about me. And Mrs. Norris told my mother, you tell him to get dressed and stand by the mailbox on Sunday morning, and we'll pick him up. So that Sunday morning, I put on my clothes all by myself, and I went out by the mailbox, and I could see the big station wagon turning around at the end of the street. And it pulled up in front of my mailbox, and I was standing there, and the window rolled down, and Mrs. Norris looked down at me, and she said, "Donnie, would you like to go to the Lord's house today?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I surely would like to go to the Lord's house today." And she turned to the kids in the car, and she said, "Boys and girls, move over. Donnie's going to church with us." And I would climb into the station wagon Sunday mornings, and I knew somebody cared about me.
Yeah, isn't that great?
Miss Norris greeted me at the gates of heaven because she helped me get
brilliant.
there.
That's brilliant.
Which brings up an interesting question, brothers and sisters. If we greet people at the gates of heaven, and we will, that we helped get there, who will you greet? See, that's the reason we're all still here, is to help everyone else get there.
That's right.
And we have much work to do.
That's right.
I was greeted by those people. Pastor, in about 3 months, I will step into the pulpit of that church where Mrs. Norris took me 51 years ago.
Wow.
I will preach in that church.
Wow.
And I'm going to remind them about Miss Norris. There's a whole generation who doesn't even know, they don't even know who she is. But you know what? I won't forget her. And she didn't forget me because she met me at the gates of heaven. She helped me get there.
That is
Right above them was a magnificent gate. It looks like the inside of an oyster. By that I mean it's made of pearl. We shouldn't be surprised. Revelation 21 says there are 12 of these gates made of pearl, and they are iridescent. They are dazzling. I thought they were alive. I don't think so now that I reflect back on it. I think the reason they looked alive is because of the light reflecting off the gate. And the light is awesome. God himself illuminates heaven. It's his place, and his glory is majestic. It is reflecting off this gate, making it look alive. In heaven, Jesus is known as the lamp of God. That's in Revelation 21 too. And his light is incredibly beautiful. And so the gate looked alive, very ornate, very magnificent, very beautiful. I looked down from the large gate at basically a small entrance. And I thought, wow, amazing gate, small entrance. Why is that? And I think the entrance is small by comparison because we go in one at a time. It's a personal decision.
Really?
It's not some faith that you belong to or some church that, I mean, it's a personal decision. You have to have an authentic personal relationship with Jesus Christ to go in that gate. So it's small.
Just back up a minute. The gate is narrow?
The gate is large. The entrance is small. Yeah, the entrance is very small. Actually big enough for just one person. Yeah.
But what's striking me is how literal the Word of God is.
It is literal.
Because Jesus talks about the way being narrow.
Yes.
How literal. We were talking about this at lunch today.
Yes.
Another friend of mine who had passed away, as he was dying, he prayed the sinner's prayer.
Yes.
And when he got to heaven, and he saw Jesus, and he said he was this incredible bright light.
Yes.
And when he came back to life, he found the Bible, and he started reading this Bible. And when he saw in the Gospels where Jesus said, "I am the light," he started shouting, "I saw that, I saw that." And we were talking about how literal. We take things so blasé sometimes in the Word.
You bet.
But there's so much truth there.
How much scripture had I preached before this happened to me that I preach totally differently now? because it's not that I mean, and now I know. You know, I was speculating, or I was believing. It was a faith thing, and now I've seen it. I mean, you know, there's a verse in Revelation 21 that says that heaven is like a bride beautifully prepared for her, a bride beautifully dressed for her groom. And I read over that hundreds of times. But now I think to myself every time I read that verse, we all ought to think of heaven that way. Like a groom standing down at the end of the aisle looking at the bride coming down and thinking, wow, what did I do to deserve this? She is a great gift from God. What if we lived thinking about heaven that way?
Yeah.
I never did. I felt it was a place I was going to go when I died, and I didn't plan to die for a long time. Do you? I mean, you don't know, do you?
No.
That's why you have to be ready now. Now is the day of salvation. You have to do it now. So yes, the gate is small, and I didn't anticipate that. I'm looking at the magnificent structure, and then I'm looking at the entrance, and it's small by comparison. But now I realize the gate is narrow. The way is narrow into heaven, and we shouldn't be surprised by that, but I really wasn't expecting that for such a magnificent gate. You can see through it. You can see in the city, and it is a city, a kingdom, a place, and you can see a street going right down the middle of the city. It appears to be made out of gold, and that's literal. I mean, now it's gold you can see through. You say, well, no, that can't be literal because you can't see through gold here. Yeah, there you can. God can make his streets out of whatever he wants. He's chosen gold that you can see through. It's heaven. So we have to forget all the things we know here, suspend all the rules of nature. It's not nature, it's heaven. It's prepared for us, and it's different from here. You could see this street, you could see magnificent structures on both sides. By any standard here on earth, I would say these structures I saw inside the city gates look like mansions to me. We shouldn't be surprised by that. Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions, and there are, you're going to like them. And beyond the mansions is kind of a hill high and lifted up. It's like a pinnacle in the middle of the city. And it is high and lifted up as God himself deserves to be. He is God. And I could see up that hill. There's a river flowing down the side of the hill. I know it's the river of life. I'm looking at thrones at the pinnacle of the hill, and I'm thinking to myself at that point, hey, it's great meeting these people, but I know they're coming in with me. I want to go in now.
Yeah,
and so I began to move forward, and I began to move through layers of all sorts of things. I saw colors I've never seen here. I smelled aromas I've never smelled here. I'm moving through layers of sound, two distinctive sounds, which I hadn't anticipated, but I really enjoyed were the sound of angels. Not just the sight of angels, but the sound of angels. I knew I would hear them, but I didn't expect to hear their wings. You can hear their wings. It's like flushing out a covey of birds, and that sound that only wings can make. So you hear the wings everywhere. It is a very comforting sound because they're the ones who bear us up, and I could experience the wings of angels. You can hear them everywhere. It's kind of a whoosh as they're hovering about and ministering to God's people. And then I moved through the music, and you know, we've talked about it before, the most memorable aspect of heaven that I had was the music. And I've asked myself many times, why music? Of all things, why would I remember the music the most? And I think it's because it's the thing that invaded me. It permeated me. I became part of the music. In heaven, you become part of the music because all authentic worship is for God. It's not for us. But we get to experience, and so we become part of that music. And I'm listening to the sounds. I'm listening to praise God. I'm listening to hallelujah. I'm listening to glory to God. I'm listening to worthy is the Lamb. And then the refrain that became so profound to me is the one I expected to hear, but not on this level. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. When I was a young man, I got a degree in broadcasting, and one of the things you never did on the radio was play two songs at the same time. I mean, you get phone calls about that. Like, I like both songs, but I don't want to hear them both. Play one and then the other. In heaven, I heard thousands of songs at the same time, and there was no chaos. Because you have heavenly ears, you can distinguish each one of them, and all of these magnificent songs fit together. They all complement each other. They all fit together. And the music permeates you. I was wrapped up in the music, and I'm overwhelmed by the aromas, and I'm experiencing the incredible feelings of those people embracing me, and I'm going through the gates, and I'm thinking, now I'm home. This is my home. This is my home, and I'm so awestruck to be here. I wasn't thinking about people back on earth because I knew they were going to follow me, the ones I loved. I knew they would be there in due course in the heavenly sense immediately after me, even though I may be separated from them for decades. In heaven, they're not missing you because they're expecting you. You'll turn right around, they'll be right behind you, because heaven, there's no passage of time. So I'm going through the gates now, and I'm thinking, yes, this is it. And just as I said that, it stopped. The music, the aroma, everything. It just in an instant. It was just as quickly as I was there, I was not there. But I didn't know it at first, and I wanted to cry out to God, God, what's happening? Where did everything go? What's going on? And before I could even get those words out of my mouth, and of course in heaven there's much more communication without words than there is with words, but I tried to form the words. I was in darkness, in silence, and I was just alone. I was isolated, and as I wanted to say, God, what happened? I heard a sound, and yet this one's not in front of me, it's behind me, and it's that pastor in the car singing, "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." And I didn't know where I was, and I didn't know what had happened, but I was back in the wreckage of the car, and he was holding onto my hand or my shoulder and saying, "What a friend we have in Jesus."
I'm glad you said that. Because he had his hand on your shoulder. He could only reach your shoulder.
That's correct.
From the back of the car.
Right.
But it almost sounds like you made a slip. He was holding your hand. But you have vivid memories of the fact that someone was holding your hand.
Yes.
And you realize it was an angel.
Yeah, well, in my first book, 90 Minutes in Heaven, I talk about going to Dick Onerecker's church almost 2 years later. Wearing braces, being lifted up onto the stage by some men who were had to pick me up and set me up there behind the pulpit. And I shared this story with everybody in Dick's church, the man who prayed for me. And you can imagine how moved they were. It was a very tearful, emotional day because they knew it had changed his life too. He prayed for a dead man and he lived. And now Dick started praying for fence posts. Anything. He just prayed for anything. So I'm telling the story, and I got through telling the story about how he crawled in the wreckage and put his hand on my, he actually, he held onto my hand, and I drew strength from his hand, and he prayed for me. And I got through speaking, and we all went to lunch, and his wife, an eyewitness on the bridge that day, leaned over while everyone else was talking, and she said what every pastor wants to hear: "You made a mistake in your sermon this morning." And I said, "I did?" She said, "Yes." And she's smiling. She said, "Dick never held on to your hand." And I said, "Well, wait a minute, Anita, I know that. I mean, a lot of things had to be filled in by other people, but I know Dick held onto my hand because I was drawing strength from him. That's how I got through all that." She says, "It didn't happen. Dick crawled in the back of the car. It was physically impossible to reach your hand. You were slumped over in the seat belt. Your arm was across the passenger seat and almost on the floor on the other side, so no one could hold your hand." I said, "But Anita, somebody held my hand." And she said, "Yes, someone held your hand, but it wasn't Dick." God sent an angel to sustain me.
And again, I want you to tell the folk what we talked about today. People think of angels as being short and chubby.
Yeah.
And, floating around on clouds.
Playing
maybe a little bit like me,
cherub,
short and chubby and
floating on a cloud, playing a harp. Forget about it.
You saw angels.
Angels aren't like that. No, they're magnificent creatures.
Yeah.
They're awesome beings. We don't become angels when we go to heaven. They're separate, different beings created for a separate purpose of God. The truth is, in the Bible, you'll find out that we have charge of the angels after this is over with. I mean, they answer to us. So in God's scheme of things, really, we're above them because we were created in His image. They were created to do His bidding, be messengers, to comfort us, encourage us, protect us, all the things that they were given the responsibility for. So I did hold the hand of an angel, but I promise you, they're magnificent creatures. And some have more than 2 wings. I mean, some of them have multiple wings, and they're really quite beautiful in every way, genderless, because there's a finite number of them. They don't reproduce. I mean, God created the angels He wanted, and that was enough. So they're very different from us, but they're quite magnificent, and they're around us all the time. They're here in the room with us. The Bible says we never know when we're entertaining them unaware. And so trust me, they're everywhere, just as the devil and his spirits are everywhere. But the angels are the ones you want to be. When I held the hand of an angel, but I didn't really know it until the person who saw my hand knew that an angel was holding that hand. And but it really comforted me, and has many times since, because I realize I'm just around them, and they're around me, and they're around you too. You may or may not know someday just how many times God spared you because He sent an angel to intervene in your life. They're everywhere. Trust me.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Q the A Podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/Q the A Podcast, over at twitter.com/Q the A Podcast. Also, don't forget to email us with your questions or comments over at qtheapodcast@gmail.com. And we invite you to go and listen to our backlog episodes and enjoy those as well.